Hi everyone, it's Shari here today, and I'm going to be making this cute card using the little mini set I Like Naps. So this is the little set that you get for Black Friday with a purchase, and it has this cute little sloth that's taking a nap on a branch. So I'm going to put these stamps in my Misty here. I'm going to put the sloth, and then there's a little leaf stamp in the set as well. And I'm just going to load those in there, and I am going to be doing Copic coloring with my images, so I'm going to be using some jet black ink because it is Copic friendly, and I'm just going to ink those up and stamp those on my scrap piece of paper. The reason why I'm using the Misty for the large stamp is because I wanted to double stamp it and make sure that image is nice and dark. I'm also going to stamp out a couple more of the little pair of leaves so that I can create my scene by having multiple leaves around on the branch. I'm going to be using some warm gray Copics to color my sloth. I started out here with the W4, but when I added the W3 on top of it, it kind of disappeared. So you'll see here in a little bit how I add some more shading in. The W7 I used for the darkest. And then now I'm blending with the W3, and you can see there how the shading I had at the bottom kind of disappeared on me. So I'm going to go back in with the W5. So I have found that using two letters, or two numbers I should say, apart gives you a little more shading contrast, especially with the grays. I'm going to keep in the same tones and color in his eyes with the dark gray, that W7, and then I'm going to color in his face. So I wanted this to be lighter, so I'm going to go in with the W1, but then to kind of give it a different tone, a little warmer, fleshy tone, I'm going to go in with the E000 and just add that on top. So it's still a gray, but it has a slightly different tone so that he has a little more definition to his face from the rest of his body. Now for the branch, I'm just going to do some simple shading. So I've got a dark brown and I've added my shading in, and then I'm going to go back in with a lighter brown and blend it out. For the leaves, I'm using two shades of green, so I'm coloring them with the lightest first, and then I did some flecks of the darker one at the bottom of each leaf. And then I went back in with a very dark warm gray and just did his tiny little toes. So now I can use the coordinating dies that go with the set to cut all these images out. I'm also going to create my panel using a cross-stitch rectangle and watercolor paper. I'm not doing watercoloring, but I have found that distress ink blends on watercolor paper very nicely. So I'm using three colors of distress ink. This one is Lucky Clover, then I've got Peacock Feathers, and then I will do Blueprint Sketch towards the top. I'm just going to go back and forth between each of my colors and blend them together to remove the line between the colors. I wanted more blue than green, so you can see I'm pulling that Blueprint Sketch down a little bit further, but I'll go back in with the Peacock Feathers and blend them together, so I've kind of got a nice blue-green there in the center. I just wanted a little bit of the lighter colors towards the bottom, but mostly a night sky. Then I'm going to go in with black soot and just go around the edges of the top to just darken it up and make it look a little more like a night sky. Now I'm going to add some stars by using some metallic watercolors. So I'm just going to get this nice and soupy here, and I'm just going to pick up that color and add some flecks onto the background. So I wanted to start with some smaller flecks of gold, so I'm going to put this paint on a block, and then I'm just going to flick the paint off the edge of the block. It's really kind of hard to see in this video, but it makes tiny, tiny little flecks of the gold. And another way to add some dimension is to use more than one color. So you can see here that I'm picking up some of that yellow gold, whereas I used the red gold first. And then I'm going to do some bigger splatters of the yellow gold. You probably will get some water droplets too, but that'll just react with the Distress ink and add more texture to the background. I'm going to go ahead and hit it with my heat tool to dry it faster, but you can see there when I move it in the light how that shimmery gold paint picks up the light and shines. Now to make my card base, I'm going to make a custom background using the little leaf stamp in the set, and I'm just stamping on a craft card base with dough ink. This looks pretty dark when you first stamp it, but it actually absorbs into the cardstock pretty well and does more of a tone-on-tone subtle design in the background. I'm just laying my panel on there so I can kind of see what's going to get covered up by it and what you're going to see so that I can even out my design. Now I'm going in with the little Z's in the stamp set, which I think is super cute and a great way to fill in the leaves. I think it's always fun to have two images when you make a background like this. And I just thought the little Z's from him sleeping were just too cute. Now that I have my pattern paper, my custom pattern paper made basically, I'm just going to define the edges a little bit using some tea dye distress ink. So I'm just going to pull that in from the outside edge in. I'm not going to completely cover this, but it does make it have a little distressed look and define the edges a little more and give it some more interest. Now that my card base is done, I can start to assemble a little bit here. I'm going to put this down with some foam adhesive. So it's popped up from the background just a little bit, but I covered the back of this panel with some foam tape and I'm centering that in my card base. And here are my cute little pieces I'm going to add. But first, I want to make my little sentiment banner. So I'm going to use this fancy wavy banner with the folded edges. And I'm going to cut that out of black cardstock so that I can white emboss my sentiment. I just thought that the black cardstock went with the kind of sleepy night scene that we have going on here a lot better than a white banner would have. So I'm going to go ahead and fold on those score lines that the die creates so that I can see the shape of where I want my sentiment to go. It's kind of hard to see on the black, so folding it kind of defines those a little better. Now this sentiment in this set is straight, but I want to curve it to match my banner. So here's my little trick. I'm going to curve it face down so that the words are the right way onto a block that is sitting on top of my banner. So I'm looking at the curve of the banner through the block. And I'm sticking it with the word side down. Then I can pick it up with another block. And it's pretty close. You can make any adjustments you might need. I pulled the ends up a little bit because it wasn't quite holding that tight curve. So now I'm going to emboss this sentiment onto this black cardstock banner. So I'm just adding my anti-static powder so that I don't have any of that white embossing powder sticking anywhere else. I've got my clear ink. And I always like to have my embossing powder ready so that my ink is still really nice and juicy when I put it on there. So I'm just going to ink that up with the clear ink. Line that up, and actually that powder on there helps a little bit too. So you can see where I've stamped it, and then I'm just going to add the powder. And tap off any extra. That anti-static powder that I put on there will help it not stick to anything except where I stamped. And you can easily clean up if any stray embossing powder gets anywhere. And then I'm just going to heat it up with my heat tool and make sure it's all nice and melted. Now you can still see there's a little bit of that powder from before, but I find that if you just kind of rub it with your finger, once that embossing powder that you melted is nice and cool, it'll come off. If it's still kind of chalky looking, you can always run a baby wipe or a chamois over it just really quickly and it will wipe that away. Now I've put some foam adhesive squares on the back of this. I use black ones since this is a black banner. I just put it in the center and I'm going to center that up on my panel where I want it. Now to hold the little tails down, I'm just going to add some liquid glue and I'm just going to tuck those under. And then the other thing I like to do is put a little glue dot between the two folds. And I just think that that holds it nice and tight and makes those edges stay down. So now I've put some foam dots on the back of my sloth here. And I'm going to position him with the branch sort of going off the side. I like that it kind of mimics the banner at the bottom by going past the outside of the rectangle. And then I'm just going to add some of the leaves that I cut and colored here using some liquid glue. I did 5 of them. I actually only ended up using 3. And finally, I added some of these teeny tiny gold star sequins. I guess they're sequins, or they're more like confetti. They're so small. That I happen to have in my stash, just with a teeny tiny dot of the liquid glue. And I'm just going to pick that up and stick those back down. It just sort of adds a little bit more to the gold that was already in the background. And there is the finished card. So here's another look. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.